Greetings, programs. I'm Louis Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. Welcome back. I've spent the last several days attempting to find a way to shoot this video I was happy with, and no matter how I set up the camera, it just didn't look good to me. So I'm afraid for a video or two, we are back to my found footage style of walks through the woods. That being said, with all of the fanfare about the show Tiger King, which I did get around to watching and think is fantastic, by the way, one of the few things I've ever considered to be worth the hype, it might be fun to show off a little bit of the property that I live on, which did used to be, before we owned it, a big cat preserve. So here in a few minutes in the video, I'll be entering what we have dubbed Jurassic Pork, the cage which used to be the basically entertainment cage for the tiger, the one where they would get all of their exercise cage. That's what I'm looking for. But anyway, the subject of this video is, once again, as promised, going to be fear. And like the last video, I'd like to start it with a quote from one of my favorite sci-fi novels, this time from a different author, and this quote, generally speaking on any of the covers worth a damn, will be directly on the front of the book. I am, of course, talking about Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, which is absolutely fantastic for as long as he lived to write them, and the famous two-word important phrase that all of us should think about more than we have been these days. Don't panic, because panicking is never a good idea. I talked a little bit last time about how we're seeing what happens when we allow our fears to control us. See, fears are inevitable. You can't really control your emotions. You can only control how you react to them. And panic is what happens when you react based off of your fear, not off of your logic. There are a lot of different things that can cause a panic. See, our fears are adjusted by how we perceive them, by different factors which may make something which really isn't that scary look abjectly terrifying in the moment. So let's talk about a few of those factors that made COVID-19 look so scary to so many people. Let's look into some of the reasons why we, as a human race, as a people on this planet, panicked. First of all, of course, I touched on in the last video, the misinformation we were getting did not help. One thing I brought up in the last video that I'd like to talk about in more detail, though, is the idea that this escaped from the Wuhan Bio Lab. That there was, in fact, we now know, a lab very close to the market where this outbreak may not have originated from, but originally spread in great numbers. And very close by is a biolab with a symbol that looks ominously like the Umbrella Corporation's logo, just recolored as their symbol. And it's, depending on who you ask, a few thousand yards to a few miles away from the market where all of this really started. And we know that that lab was not up to our standards of safety when it comes to biolab containment from reports in the past. This isn't weird conspiracy stuff. This is general knowledge if you go and research the lab. We know that it was funded in part by the Obama administration and Dr. Fauci, and we do in fact know for a fact that that lab was working on bats infected with the coronavirus, and it's been highly suggested that one of the things they were working on was seeing whether or not this would be transmittable to humans. So, when I say this virus could have come from a biolab in Wuhan and show you a picture of a biolab with what looks to be the Umbrella Corporation's logo on the front of it, anyone who's had any contact with Resident Evil is going to have some immediate thoughts of the zombie apocalypse. anyone who's ever considered a bioweapon to be their biggest fear, which is a very logical one, as it is absolutely terrifying in the day and age that we live in, well, they're all of a sudden going to be hearing Biolab and thinking, so China was making a virus or trying to get a virus to be more transmittable to humans. And honestly, while it's possible, and we certainly have the genetic engineering to do so, there are better options, and there's just no evidence that that is the case. From everything that we can see, this was a lab that was working on infectious diseases, probably to try and prevent their spread, probably with the abject purpose of stopping what happened from happening. And there was a leak. There were substandard safety norms. A guy got bit by a bat, and the virus got out. Now, we don't know that for sure, but with the evidence that we have, it is highly likely, especially as one of the scientists who was working in the lab has confirmed, or at least stated, that a virus that she was working on shares a 96%, I believe it was in the high 90s. It was over 95. I think it was a 96% genetic similarity with COVID-19. Now, that is within mutation variation for viruses like a coronavirus, which means that it is highly likely that this is the virus that we're seeing. That she was, in fact, working on COVID-19 under a different name in the Wuhan Bio Lab prior to the outbreak. So, people are absolutely terrified of a zombie-esque bioweapon constructed by the Chinese government from a diabolical lab and then released into their wet markets to spread. And that's just simply not the case. I mean, there is plenty of evidence of what really likely happened, and sadly, it looks like it may have just been an accident. I say sadly because aren't world wars just interesting and fun? I'm kidding, of course. So, just looking at the Wuhan Bio Lab with its weird-looking symbol, there's, 4 or 5 reasons that people might start to panic right there. We discussed in my last video the numbers being different and the fact that the experts seem to, every couple of weeks, go back on what they've said. Here in America, we were initially, for instance, told not to wear masks, that wearing masks would make you more likely to touch your eyes, that it would make you think you were safe so you'd go out and do things, and that wearing masks could actually increase the spread of the virus. Not 2 weeks later, there were states that were requiring masks to be inside businesses or allowing businesses to require masks inside. And we were all being told to make homemade masks, which may or may not do anything to help the spread of the virus, and wear those just in case. And now we've been told that, ultimately speaking, it spreads better indoors and that we should have all been outside, mask or no mask, anyway. What we're being told is the case about this virus switches every couple of weeks as new information emerges because, well, we just jumped the gun. We did too much before we had the details. And someone who I respect greatly on YouTube was debating with me a little bit in the comments of my last video. In fact, I still need to respond to him that, well, we couldn't have known that the death tolls initially from places like Italy, even if it was mostly old people dying, we didn't have that data. All we knew were that the death tolls of people who had the virus were making it look like it could be as high as 10%, which with something that spreads like a coronavirus would be abjectly terrifying. I don't know how many of you are still using the word decimate properly, but that could literally decimate the human population just from that one disease, with further after effects that would cause more loss of life. So a 10% death rate for something with a 2-week incubation period. Oh, it's so terrifying. But from the very beginning, anyone who's paid any attention to these viruses in the past or looked into any of the real data knew that this was not the case. If you looked at the numbers in Italy, they reported that basically everyone dying was old people. We knew for a fact that testing had not been done in great numbers, that for the most part, we had no idea how many people had this coronavirus, which my friend in the comments, Rational Wrong Thing, he stated that, well, we couldn't have known, because we didn't have the testing, the death rate looked so high. But we have, in fact, dealt with coronaviruses in the past. A rather bad coronavirus outbreak has, in fact, happened in my lifetime. And really, we knew, based on that information, that probably the majority of carriers, but a large number of carriers, would be asymptomatic. We knew that this type of virus creates why can I not say that word? Anyways, creates carriers who spread the virus but never show any signs of it. And while for some people this is just another reason to be terrified of it because you'll never know who you get it from, what it really means when you look at the numbers is that the hospitalization and death rates are radically lower than initially reported. Probably lower than is still being reported, as the World Health Organization released a statement on this virus that if someone dies in a hospital and it can be coded as the coronavirus, to do so, basically. That if they have cancer and the flu and die, it'll be coded as cancer. But if they have cancer and the coronavirus and die, it's coded as coronavirus. This gives the coronavirus a boost in its death toll compared to any other virus, which means that because it is being held to different standards and judged on different metrics, it's impossible for us to verify how deadly this is compared to viruses of the past. We simply are not being given proper information from the hospitals to do so. And in many cases, like in New York, they're being paid to essentially lie to us, with cases where the death was caused by the coronavirus getting more money to the hospital than any other cause. And so if I was a doctor and if testing wasn't necessary to say someone had died with the coronavirus, if, we don't have to prove that they ever had it, and if I feel that my hospital's underfunded, well, I might have to, especially if I think that it could get me equipment in the long run that could help me save more lives. I could even see doctors justifying to themselves lying about patients that they knew didn't have the coronavirus and seeing it as being an ends justify the means greater good situation. So we've backed ourselves into a corner with panic based off of not even just bad information, but a bad perspective on the information, because at no point during this entire pandemic did I panic. When people showed me the numbers that said that there was a 10% mortality rate, I said that that was ridiculous because there would be bodies piled up in the streets in China visible from the air. And I know they've had their crematoriums working overtime and that there are a lot of dead people in Wuhan. However, people just don't understand, I guess, what a 2-week incubation period on a spreadable virus with a 10% death toll would look like. But we could tell just from the early reports coming out of China, even now knowing that most of it was lies, that there was no way that this virus had a death rate of over 1%, which still would have been absolutely terrifying. The real death rate is hovering somewhere between 0.01 and 0.02% from the studies I've seen recently, so not even near 1%. And that would have been staggering. A 1% death toll might have been worth this lockdown. It's hard to say when we're now seeing studies which, again, is something I had talked about months ago, that being locked inside reduces your immune system, that you're more likely to catch and die from other viruses because you've been locked away from them for several months, that wearing masks constantly increases your carbon dioxide intake, which for small amounts of time to avoid a virus would probably be worth it, but for months on end, when you're probably not going to catch the virus anyway, say where I live, where there's no real outbreak, it's just damaging brain cells. It's making the population stupider, which might explain why they're willing to buy the experts completely flipping their story every 2 weeks without seeming for the basic people to have much questions about it. So, back to the basic point here of don't panic. When something is scary to you, when you're terrified of something, when you feel that primal feeling of fear, just like I said in the last video, you need to stop and get all of the facts. But what you need to do precisely is you need to see exactly why you're afraid. Go through the details. When I first heard the story about the Bio Lab, I was just like, that's terrifying. I did. I had a moment of abject terror where I thought maybe China made a bioweapon. Maybe this is a test release and that the real weapon is much, much worse. Picture same incubation and spread with a different death rate. Maybe that 10% rate. This could just be the test run. Ah! And then I did a little bit of digging into the facility itself, saw that there's pretty good records about what's been going on in the facility, and that while not all of it's good, it's certainly not looking like it's bioweapon research. And while the Umbrella Corporation symbol does look kind of scary on the building, that could just as easily been an accident as it was someone with a sense of humor. So we really have nothing to be afraid of outside of our own perspective on the issue. This takes me to the other story that I wanted to touch on, though I'm not going to have time to go into the details that I would like, and I may have to bring this up in another video. I've rambled on. But recently there was a case of Ahmaud Arbery, a black man, being shot in, now I can't remember which state it was. Anyway, in a state where there are people who say that it's not surprising that there was racism involved. And I'm not saying that there was. In fact, I'm fairly certain that there wasn't. But this is a story that is absolutely being covered in the most ridiculous light. My dad, who's requested that he not be involved in my videos, but pissed me off so much I have to at least mention it, came up to me the other day and was talking to me about, racial issues in the country, and said, well, a black man was shot for jogging the other day. Ahmaud Arbery was not shot for jogging. There are reports that he was only a couple of miles away from his home. These are false. That his neighborhood is only a couple of miles from the edge of the neighborhood he was in. His house, where he lives, is about 10 miles as the crow flies, as I understand, and about 12 miles on foot from the area where he was in when he was shot. Which means that if you're taking a jog that far away from your home, you are running basically the equivalent of a marathon, which would explain probably why he was walking and not jogging. Anytime he was on video footage, he was probably quite tired. A man matching his description is then known to have been in a construction site where there have been several break-ins recently, and several thefts have been reported in the area, including a gun. So the men who went after him had every reason to believe that this was an armed thief based on their recent experiences in their neighborhood. More than that, one of the men was an ex-cop who had been asked by the police to keep an eye on the situation, whose number had in fact been given to the homeowner, and who had been called to come in and take a look at the situation because of the ongoing thievery in the area. As for the shooting itself, we have video footage. We know exactly how Ahmaud Arbery got shot. And say what you will about the rest of the situation, the intentions, whether or not you believe he was a criminal, and he certainly didn't deserve to get shot for breaking into a construction site. What Ahmaud Arbery deserved to be shot for is assaulting an ex-cop holding a shotgun. I'm sorry, if you run straight towards a man with a shotgun and try to wrestle the weapon away from him, you deserve to be shot, because that's the only real expected outcome for you at that point. It's entirely stupid to think that anything else would even be possible. You are, in fact, 99.9% of the time in that situation, going to be shot. And if someone is pointing a gun at you and hasn't shot you yet, says they would like to ask some questions in the middle of the street, when police have been called and you heard the police called, it might be best just to answer a few questions till the police get there and sort out whether or not this man should be holding a gun on you, rather than rushing him, which is, in my opinion, when someone has aimed a gun at you and not shot you yet and is asking you questions, abjectly the stupidest decision that you can make. It is a decision that I would think would only be made by a guilty man, guilty of something he was afraid of being caught for, or just, I don't know, a mentally handicapped one, which from the research I've done, Ahmaud Arbery was not. So, to say that he was shot for jogging is, well, about as stupid as rushing a grown man wielding a shotgun. But that's just my opinion. Of course, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Sorry for the found footage shaky video style, but I do miss these walks in the woods. As always, I'm your host, Louis Cipher. Thanks for watching the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. I know I said I'd do several videos on the subject of fear, and I'll probably have more coming in the future, but I do think I'll take a break from the subject, as there are a couple of other things I'd like to tackle. Namely, I think Joe Biden has said some things recently, excuse me, which deserve to be addressed. Oh, here's one of the big polls. This was for part of the fence that got torn down in the flood since we've got here. You can see, though, that this used to be for the, well, this was part of the tiger cage, actually. The tiger out here, it got too cold for him in this area in the winter for tigers, so the guy who owned the place before us had a hot tub that was on all the time that the tiger would swim in the winter. It's still out here somewhere. Anyway, I'll go ahead and let you guys go, but thanks for watching.